Firstly, welcome and thank you for your thank you to you all for attending today. It is my pleasure to host with Roger Manning today this webinar. My name is Emilio Di Stefano. I am Director and Principal of Di Stefano & Co. I have my good friend Roger Manning here, Principal Consultant and Defence Lead at BidWrite, who will be co-hosting this presentation. And we also have Rob Cook from BidWrite. You won't get to see his lovely face, but he'll be coordinating the Q&A at the end of the session. The purpose of today's webinar really is to celebrate the strategic partnership between BidWrite and Di Stefano & Co. And we wanted to do something a little bit different, something that wasn't just the EDM or a LinkedIn post, but actually provide some value to our respective clients, as well as those that might be new to or wanting to grow in the defence sector. So hence we've got this webinar today, and we hope that you do very much get quite a bit out of it. Just some admin, we will keep questions until the end before we answer them, but you are encouraged to put your questions in as we go. And please just remember to select everyone when you do put your questions in to ensure that we can keep a track of any common threads that are coming up where it might be around the same type of question. If we do not get to all the questions today, we're more than happy to take those questions offline and come back to you later on after the webinar itself. The last point I'll make today before getting into it is that the webinar slides will be shared with you. So please don't feel that you need to furiously be taking notes. You're more than welcome to, but they will be shared with you after the presentation. All right, so who is Di Stefano & Co? Well, Di Stefano & Co is a defence-focused management and security consultancy, and we help those businesses that are either new to or wanting to grow in the defence sector in navigating that complex defence industry environment. We do that in three ways: through strategy, development, and grants. And essentially with strategy, what we're doing is helping those that are either new to or wanting to grow in the sector through understanding whether the opportunity is right for them and qualifying that defence sector opportunity before they might go about actually developing the strategies, and we help them develop the strategies to ensure that they actually get traction when they go after the sector and the opportunity. On the development side of the business, we actually help them to lift their business and security maturity such that they can compete in the sector. And we do a lot of work around defence security, DISP membership attainment, Essential 8 compliance, and cyber in that space. On the grant side of the business, it's all about helping businesses access grant funds to be able to upskill their workforces and invest in plant and equipment, which helps them compete in the sector. In terms of our clientele, we work with businesses that are small, 10-person fabricators, all the way through to multinational corporations, including prime defence contractors. And they're usually across engineering, manufacturing, and technology, but often across service providers too. Just a bit about myself as to why I'm here today talking. I was a founder of Di Stefano & Co. 8 years ago. But I've got 18 years defence experience. So 18 years in the sector, working as an engineer to begin with in electronic warfare for the likes of BAE Systems and Tenix Defence, before moving into an SME and actually working out what it's like to actually supply into the primes and provide services. So we were a heavy engineering workshop with about 70-odd staff, providing to the likes of ASC on the Collins-class submarine program. From there, started this business, and that's been 8 years now, but I also spent 4 years contracting into the Defence Teaming Centre, which is one of the peak industry bodies in Australia, helping those that are in the defence sector. So helping advise businesses on whether the defence sector is for them, and helping them understand where the opportunities might lie in the sector too. So that's a bit about me and the company. I will now hand over to Roger Manning, who will talk a bit about BidWrite himself.
Hey, thanks very much, Emilio. Hi everyone, great to meet you all online. Hey, BidWrite, we're Australia's sort of leading specialist technology tender consultancy company. We help organisations in three main ways. So the largest part of our business is working side by side with clients to help win tenders more easily, to really help drive their business growth and meet their business objectives. The other areas where we also help is on training. We have some great training courses to help companies develop their own organisational and individual tendering capabilities and competencies within tendering specifically. And the third one is a very exciting area that we're exploring at the moment, is helping to unlock the benefits of artificial intelligence in tendering. The potential for that is particularly exciting. We're not going to be talking about that today, unfortunately, but maybe for another time. Myself, I've been in defence industry pretty much my entire career. Started off as a technical role, and for the vast majority, it's been in business development and tendering roles. I am a self-confessed tendering geek. I love tendering. I love winning. I love helping clients succeed. That's what makes me get up in the morning to come to work. And so really looking forward to sharing some of our knowledge today. Thanks very much, Amelia. I'll just hand back to you now.
Thank you. And Roger is definitely the tender geek, I can tell you that. So why the strategic partnership? Why did we form that? Well, essentially about 18 months ago, BidWrite came to Stefano & Co. and asked for some help around their defence security. So they needed to attain DIS membership in order to continue working in the sector, and we helped them through that process over the course of quite a few months. Through that process, we learned pretty quickly that BidWrite were not only proactive and easy to work with, but they were a fantastic organisation in terms of value alignment. Very much they're the type of organisation that puts their clients and their clients' results first, and that very much aligns with the way that we do business. So we saw an opportunity, given that we do offer very complementary services and we don't really compete in any way. We saw an opportunity to really offer something up that wasn't there on our own to our clients. And so where Stefano & Co. provides a lot of the strategy and pre-positioning work for our clients, and we provide that maturity uplift in terms of business and security maturity, we were never able to provide that final crucial piece of the puzzle. We weren't able to help our clients actually win the work itself. We could help them get to the RFQ and the RFT, but we weren't able to support them in actually developing a compelling bid response or tender response, which is exactly what BidWrite bring to the table. And they also bring the education and training such that their clients can actually learn to do a lot of this stuff themselves. So we thought that was a great mix, and together we can actually help these businesses capture that defence sector opportunity and capture and turn it into defence sector revenues, which is what it's all about. So why were the interest in defence? Well, it's no surprise really when you hear $270 billion in the headlines, people get interested. And that's the amount that defence has committed to deliver on its acquisition ambitions described in the 2016 white paper. And that was something that, that number's been bandied around a lot. It's actually going to be revised and probably higher given the more recent Defence Strategic Review. But that's a number that has been committed to. So those funds are not just being talked about, they are committed to. And that's also in the 2020 Defence Strategic Update. And if we consider that is just the acquisition budget, that is the budget for defence to go and buy new capability. That is to go and buy new weapon systems, new platforms such as new warships and that type of thing. It's nothing to do with the actual sustainment of those same platforms. It's nothing to do with the operational budget of the ADF either. So it is quite significant. And if we consider the sustainment budget and the acquisition budget, we're actually talking about $535 billion being committed out to the end of the decade. So quite significant. And for those that are willing to actually play the long game and invest in the sector, there can be quite immense benefits. And they include long-term consistent contracts, high margin work, and the opportunity to realize significant growth. And one of the ones that's probably not mentioned on here is that we often get clients coming to us because of the diversification that it can offer. So it might be a company that's heavily involved in mining and they want to diversify their revenue so they don't have all their eggs in that mining basket or that oil and gas basket. So it provides a great opportunity for that. This is a quick graph I thought I'd pull out from the 2020 Defence Strategic Updates. And all I really want you to take from this is that the defence budget is growing. And as I said earlier, that is going to get bigger and there's going to be more expenditure. So this excludes AUKUS in terms of the new submarine project. I think there's only about $9 billion within this 270 they talk about for the acquisition budget in this current graph here. Whereas there's 368 billion slated for AUKUS over the next 3 decades. But what's most noteworthy here is that the area that industry can actually get most involved in is the sustainment and the acquisition. So those areas in green and yellow, and those areas are growing faster than any other area within the defence budgets. And we expect that by the end of the decade, they will have grown, and this is the overall budget will have grown by more than 75% since the beginning of that decade. So quite significant. We often wonder why people get confused when we talk about defence. We shouldn't, because it is a highly regulated and bureaucratic organisation. And by its very nature, it plans in decades as opposed to years or months. So given that it's completely funded by the taxpayer also, we do find that the acquisition budgets and any of the budgets are often at the peril of the government of the day. So you do need to get used to changes. They can be good and bad, but that's what happens when it's a highly political environment. One of the key points to note here, though, don't worry about all the different policy frameworks that are there. They often change, and we're waiting on a few more, which I'll describe in a moment. But the key point is in 2016, the government and defence made it very clear that Australian industry were to be seen as a fundamental input to capability. And what does that mean? Essentially, defence are now treating Australian industry in the same way that they treat their platforms, with the same level of importance as they treat their platforms, their personnel, their training capabilities. So it means that Australian industry has the opportunity, and it is now mandatory for defence to at least consider Australian industry as part of the capability development process. So hence we're here today talking about the defence sector opportunity for industry. In terms of what defence is, so we have a bit of a closer look. If I was to define the defence industry, it's really businesses that are engaged in the manufacture and delivery of products and services for use in defence and security applications. And those applications are generally across 5 different domains. So one of the things that I often get asked is, well, you know, we want to get into defence. How do we do that? And the first question I ask is, well, where do you want to get involved? And they say defence. But unfortunately, it's broader. Defence is quite broad. So depending on where you play in one of those 5 domains or more, and they are air, land, maritime, sometimes known as sea, space, and cyber, it can require a very different strategy in order to break into those markets. And the reason for that is, for example, if you're wanting to provide parts or machine parts for the Joint Strike Fighter program in the aerospace sector, there are very stringent quality controls and other security controls that could be ITAR controls and all sorts. That may not be the case in other domains, such as land, for example, and the tolerances wouldn't be quite as tight there. So all I'm getting at here is that depending on which domain your existing capability is best suited to, or you might be willing to invest in new capability, then it can mean a very different strategy. And so the different domains are quite necessitate different things. One thing that's not talked about enough there, sorry, Roger, is the defence estate and infrastructure. And that is really an enabler to all of those domains I just mentioned. And the reason I mention that is that there's a lot of money that's put into defence estate and infrastructure. And without it, the rest of the domains just couldn't operate as they do. So it's often one that flies under the radar, so to say. And it's an area that it's an area that we often recommend our clients have a good look at, because it provides quite sustainable revenue streams, and it's not as up and down as you find some of the major acquisition projects might be. So there's been quite a few changes over the recent years, and driven by really a constant shifting of geopolitical and strategic environments, as well as a change in the federal government. And some of those, so one of the things that we saw come out of that was Defence released the 2020 Defence Strategic Update, which was new for Defence. It wasn't something they normally did. They normally provided Defence white papers, and the last one was in 2016. But with the 2020 Defence Strategic Update, it was recognised that the geopolitical and strategic environment was changing faster than it had in the past, and we needed to change the way that we looked at our prioritisation for defence spend and force posture and that type of thing. And what they did commit to there was that $575 billion out to the end of the decade. And then in 2021, we saw the AUKUS Trilateral Security Pact announced, along with the conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines deal with the US and the UK. And that was where they announced that $368 billion program, or up to $368 billion, up to that's out to 2055. So you can see there are some really long timeframes they talk about in defence. More recently, we've seen industry become quite frustrated because there's been quite a number of reviews. And in 2020, or earlier this year, I should say, there was the 2023 Defence Strategic Review that was released. And that had a far-reaching recommendations. One of those was to establish a guided weapons and explosive ordnance enterprise, and they put $4.1 billion towards that. And already we're seeing clients that are benefiting as a result of that contract here in Adelaide in particular, but also all over the country. But there was also another review that came out of it, which was the surface fleet review. So basically to have a look at the surface fleet combatants, so that is the warships, the tier 2 vessels, the smaller vessels, and have a look at whether they are still appropriate as a force in terms of, given the fact that we are going to have these new submarines in the next few years or so. So who can get involved in the sector? Well, the good news is it's essentially any company. We've got clients that are product manufacturers, contract manufacturers, training providers, universities, lots of service providers, trade-based organizations, electrical services, telecommunications, that type of thing. And we've got clients that are overseas OEMs. Now, it is always better if they can register their business in Australia in terms of breaking into the Australian industry because of the Australian Industry Capability Framework, which supports Australian industry. But the key point here is that there's really nothing stopping a business, whether it be a service provider or a manufacturer, getting into the sector, provided they're willing to invest. Now, how you do that is another thing, and that's where it becomes more complex, and it can really differ depending on the type of company you are and who you want to be targeting. So where you might have specific IP, or you might be undertaking developmental projects, or it may be a classified project, sometimes you get the opportunity to go direct to the government or defence themselves and the department that is. So it might be Defence Science and Technology Group that you might be doing a developmental project with directly. But what we find in the main is that businesses are usually dealing with the defence supply chain. So the prime defence contractors are the ones that will basically manage the contract. They're usually system integrators, and they'll get subcontractors or contractors to actually manufacture the sub-assemblies and do that type of thing. So they'll have their own tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. And then the company that is looking to target the sector needs to work out, well, which one of those tiers are they going to be targeting? It's often said, and this is, it is generally speaking the case, that the lower down the tier you target, the lower the barrier to entry. So if you were targeting a tier 3, it may not be as onerous in terms of all the different boxes you need to tick as if you were targeting the defence prime, which may be the likes of a BAE, a Lockheed Martin, a Northrop Grumman, and those types. So if you are considering looking at breaking into the sector or want to grow in the sector, there are obviously quite a few things that you need to consider. And I'm not suggesting by any means that you need to tick every single one of these boxes. I won't touch on tendering requirements. I'll let Roger do that. He does it much better than me. But there are a lot of other requirements. They might be ISO management systems. They might be security requirements. And that's one that we see probably more so across the board, whereas AS 9100 under the ISO and other management system certifications, it may be more applicable if you're doing defence and aerospace work, specifically aerospace and space. So for a machine shop, that might be one if you're working on a joint strike fighter, whereas for somebody working in a maritime program, that may not be needed. Similarly, we see that defence really likes to see foresight and likes to see maturity in your strategic planning and your forecasting. They want to know that you're going to be around for the long term because they're here for the long term and they need you to be on their programs for the long term if they're going to take 10, 15, 20 years to actually manufacture or more. And I should just say on that last slide, what's most important, you don't need to tick all those boxes straight up. What's most important is that you have a plan. Defence want to see that you have a bit of a roadmap and that you've got investment plans in place such that, over time you will get there. They like to see that continuous improvement. So is defence right for you? Well, it's a good question and I can't help you answer it. I can, but not today. So one of the things that we often find is that companies see the big numbers and they think, oh, this must be great. And it can be, but there's a lot of other things you need to consider. And some of those things may include your risk appetite, your appetite for investment in closing some gaps that might be in your business at the moment. You might need to invest in new plant and equipment to be able to take on the opportunity. And you might have a return on investment expectation that is just not suitable for defence at this point in time. The other thing is we've undertaken defence sector due diligence activities where we find that a company has got great opportunities in the sector, but they're at capacity. And for them to actually try and pursue the sector when they don't necessarily have the business development resources, it's probably not going to go too well. So we actually suggest in some cases that they put it on ice and come back in 12 months' time and have another look. But if you want to help yourselves make a decision, some of the questions that we do recommend you ask yourselves are you willing to run a marathon as opposed to a sprint? Defence is absolutely strategic in its procurement, and some of these procurements can go over many years or decades. And because of that, it does mean that it takes a long time to make decisions, and you need to prepare yourself for that marathon and be able to run that marathon. Another question you can ask yourself is, can you commit to investing the time and effort required to yield sustainable results? So business development efforts, because of those strategic procurement timeframes, are often protracted and require that medium to long-term effort to yield those sustainable results. And lastly, are you prepared to play the often long and waiting game? It can take 12 to 36 months, and that's something I used to make the point over when I was in the Defence Industry Association, is making sure that people know this is not something we're going to walk out the door with a PO tomorrow. So it's very important to be willing to play that waiting game, especially with the delays that we've just had. So as much as it may sound like I'm trying to scare you off, I'm not. There's some great opportunities there. And there's also an immense amount of support for this sector, more than I've seen in any other sector that I've ever been exposed to. So we've got industry associations, member organisations, state and federal government agencies that are there to support you through the maze or navigate that defence sector environment. There's also consultancies, of course, like ourselves, and there's quite a few out there that can help you in doing this. And we would recommend that you get to know people that have the network, that have been around the block a few times, because it can help shortcut your way or your progress towards actually winning that first job in defence. This is just a snapshot of some of those agencies or organisations that are out there. And the key point is here, you've got, if you're an SME or even if you're not, these days you've got limited time and capacity. So focus your efforts, work out which organisation is best suited to your needs, and then invest in those organisations. They can be a great way to work out who's who in the zoo and get a bit of an understanding of the lay of the land. So if you've got any questions around any of that and you wanted to better understand who might be best suited to you, because some are only operating in some geographic locations, for example, and some are stronger in some locations, then I'd be happy to take questions either in the Q&A or perhaps afterwards another time. But with that, I will now hand over to my friend Roger, and he can take you through tendering.
Hey, thanks very much, Emilio. So we're now ready to tender, all ready to tender into defence. We decided defence is right for us. We've established relationships, we've ticked all the boxes, and now we're ready to tender. Great. So first things first, and one of the most important things that you can do for your business from a tendering perspective is ruthless qualification. Bidding is rarely a level playing field, and the path to success is often bid less, but win more. Bid really strategically. And there's plenty of workflows out there that can help you go through a bid, no bid sort of process. And it often comes down to 4 key questions. Is the opportunity real? So will it result in a contract for somebody at the end of the day? Do we want it? Does it fit with our core business strategy? Can we make a profit on it? Can we win it? Now, what an important question is, can we really win this opportunity? And then finally, once we win it, can we do it? Can we deliver? Ensure that we deliver. So that's a really important piece of advice. First up is bid less, win more. And when I look at organisations that do really well at tendering, perhaps feels like they win more than they should, they do 4 things really well. The first is they are extremely well positioned to win. And this is why I'm particularly excited to be working with Emilio and his team, is what you do before the tender comes out is the most important driver for success on any one opportunity. And organisations that work with Stefano are definitely going to be better positioned than they would otherwise have been when it comes into the tendering stage. The second one is making sure we stay in the game, being compliant. There's lots of boxes to tick, but we need to ensure that we are compliant and we stay in the game. The third one is of course, price. I'm not going to stand here and say price is not important. We need to be well priced, but we need to sell on value. And the fourth one is making sure, my most favourite one, is making sure we have a really persuasive story to win. And I'm just going to go through each of those 4 now and briefly and share some of the key important things to take away in relation to each of those four factors to success. So the first is positioning. And there's often sort of 3 C's that we consider in the tendering world when it comes to positioning. The first, and this is exactly where sort of the team at Stefano can definitely help. The first is the customer. We really need to know the right people well enough, and we need to know that we understand what is important to them. Then there's the competition. Tenders are the most competitive thing we do as an organisation. So we absolutely need to understand how we compare against the other options that are available to clients. And the third one is your own capability. What's your brand and reputation in the market? Do you have great products and solutions that are going to meet the needs for defence and the defence companies that you're going to be bidding into? Do you have the best team and resources required to deliver? And finally, do you have a sound pricing strategy and commercial strategy to win? So those are the 3 C's around positioning, and this is what you really need to be focusing on, and that's certainly what Stefano & Co can help you sort of focus on your journey with them. But what you're doing for all that positioning is basically building trust. We're building trust with our clients within defence. Defence is a really risk-averse sector, and the greater the trust we can build, the better position we're going to be to win. And there's 3 important elements to trust that we need to bear in mind in our business. And the first is the logic. That's having the ability and being able to demonstrate that you can actually do the job. And that's where most people sort of focus, is on that logic and elements of trust. Trust us, we can do the job. But there's 2 other really important elements to trust we need to bear in mind, particularly within defence. The second one of these 2 is empathy. Clients need to know that you understand what is important to them, that you genuinely care about the outcomes you're going to help deliver for them and the success that you will deliver for them. We need to have that understanding. That empathy is a really important driver in building trust, and doing that in the positioning stage before a tender's release is the best time to be doing that. And the final element to trust is authenticity. This is where your values and behaviours, and show that you live and breathe those values and behaviours, and how you interact with clients and defence is really important. Showing that your values are aligned with defence is particularly important in this sector. So the 3 elements of trust: logic, empathy, and authenticity. Really important when it comes to positioning. Moving on to the second factor, compliance. Now, Emilio's already talked a lot about some of the boxes to tick, and when it comes to tendering, they can certainly help tick those boxes in relation to standards and regulations and security requirements you're going to need. There's a bunch of other things we need to comply with in terms of requirements to do the job, the contract, the conditions of tender, or the rules of the game, and the response schedules. Now, I'm going to just give you 2 pieces of advice when it comes to compliance within tendering. The first is follow the bouncing ball. What I mean by this is defence and primes are very clear on what information they want, and we need to follow the structure they ask for that information in. So we don't want to be changing the order in which they ask us for information just because we think it would be better fit and it helps us tell a story. We need to make sure that we stick to the structure and the framework that they've asked us to respond to. It might seem really obvious, and I have seen a lot of organisations actually divert from that just because they think, well, we know better, we can tell our story in a different way. But what we're doing when we're making it that clear is we are making our proposals as easy to read and evaluate as possible. And that is really, really important when it comes to tendering, is making the job of the evaluation team as easy as possible. Because the person that we want to have just read our proposal is that person there kicking back, smiling, life is good, boy, that was an easy read. As opposed to someone who is reading our proposal and is really struggling to get through the content, can't understand what it is we're saying, and just getting absolutely frustrated by what we presented to them. This is important because the person whose life we've made easy and good is more likely to give us higher marks than the other person, even for exactly the same offer, even for exactly the same solution, the same answer. They will give us higher marks because we've made their job easy. The second one on compliance, and this is possibly the biggest downfall whenever I'm reading or reviewing tenders, is make sure we answer the question. You can insert your own F word there, but answer the question. Too often, I review responses, and I look at the question, I say, we've not answered the question. There's nothing more that frustrates defence and clients more than not answering the question. That's compliance. The third factor is, of course, price and value. Defence is great, and specialist defence and the primes do buy on value. We are not in a lowest price compliant bid wins market. We can sell on value. But in the absence of any known difference or better value, people will buy on price. And this is what drives the myth that you always lose on price. When I hear organisations say that we lost because we lost on price, our price wasn't right, I will challenge that and say it's more likely that we gave them no reason to pick us on anything other than the headline price we pitched to them. So how do you actually start selling on value? And that's obviously a big topic in itself, but there's three key ways we can start selling on value within our proposals. First one is benefits. Benefits imply value. So make sure you describe the benefits of the solution. This is answering the so what question. We've pitched what our solution, this means that you can do this. This will deliver this outcome. Make sure that you link your solution to benefits from a client perspective. The second one is to make sure that we quantify as much as we can and be as specific as we can in our proposals. Being vague and generic in our proposals is a real persuasion killer. The more we quantify, the more specific, the more believable and credible we are, and the better chance we have of selling on value. And the third way is to get away from the headline costs. Think about all the other costs where we can have a positive impact on defence or the defence industry which we're bidding into. So it might be maintenance costs, operational costs, training costs, license costs. Try and get away from just the headline cost over what it is we're offering. So that's value. And the final one is my favourite, of course, is having a persuasive story. And here's the thing. And this number one mistake organisations make when they're tendering is they make it all about themselves. Well, I'm sorry, your proposals are not about you, they're about your clients and what you are going to deliver for defence. So how do we start shifting that? And the best way to do that is to have a really persuasive story up front, a really strong client persuasive story up front. So I'm going to give you a very brief framework, simple framework here that you can start using today in any of your bids and proposals going forward. The first is to identify what matters to your stakeholders. What is it they're trying to achieve? It often comes back to this understanding I've talked about, and Emilio's been talking about, understanding what's important. And we're going to come up with a whole list of those. Then we need to group these into 3 or 4 themes. 3 or 4 is more than enough. 3 or 4 themes that are focused on, groups around something that's really important for the client. Once we have that, okay, what's our approach going to be to solve each of those key things? What is it we're going to do? What is it we're offering? What's our strategy? And once we've done that, okay, how might we compare? Remember, this is a competition against the competition and against others and other options that the client may have. What's our competitive position? And this will help us understand ways we can differentiate ourselves in ways that matter to our key defence client stakeholders. Once we've got all of that, we will then likely create 3 or 4 sort of targeted strategy statements that support each theme. And then we reiterate, we test and refine. And the best places to do this is in a workshop, brainstorming activity. But what we get out of this is a really strong framework for a strong client persuasive story that will likely provide a framework for the executive summary for your submission. The other thing in terms of persuasive story is presentation matters. Defence and defence industry typically tell you very rigid on what they want, not how they want it presented. So this gives you complete freedom in page design, page layout, including margins, heading styles, use of colour, having attractive headers and footers. We do not need to be presenting our clients with page after page of text like this, because they're as likely to be motivated to read it as you are, but we have great freedom in how we present, which is fantastic from a tendering perspective. And then finally, I would urge you to avoid classic proposal speak. What I mean by this is things like fluff. People think we just need to fluff up our document. We need to talk about world leading, world class, best in breed. Those are all just words that are completely meaningless to a client and mean nothing. They do not help you win. We need to get rid of the guff. So we need to make our responses as concise as possible, get rid of all the redundancy, and only provide information that's absolutely relevant to the evaluation team. Tendering in defence is often very technical, but we need to be mindful in trying to minimise the amount of geek or overly technical language in our proposals, because we're not writing all the time to our peers. If they don't understand it first time, then we failed. It is unlikely that any evaluator is going to give you the opportunity of reading your proposals for a second time. And the fourth one is weasel. We need to, defence industry, they absolutely want to know that you are committed. So we need to sort of get rid of all that vague sort of non-committal language around maybe we could do this, we could do that, we might do this. So avoid fluff, guff, geek, and weasel. So those are four sort of, some bits of advice around the four key factors for success. I'd just like to, conclude our session before we open it up to questions, and please start thinking about those questions. It's just, just to remind ourselves why I'm particularly excited about our relationship with Stefano & Co. Their services around strategy development and grants in the defence sector absolutely essential for helping clients position themselves for success going in towards the tendering, and that's where we would then love to pick up from the great groundwork that they've done, and together really deliver great success and great outcomes for our clients and defence industry here in Australia. So that's sort of, I'll just hand over to Emilio for any concluding remarks, and then we'll open up the floor.
Thanks, Roger. No, I just want to say, look, the reason I'm excited about it is, we can do all of the groundwork we want, but if our clients get to the point where they get the RFT or the RFQ and they can't respond in a compelling way and they don't win the work, at the end of the day, we don't look great either. So I really do see, as much as it's cliche, I see you guys bringing the missing piece of the puzzle to the table, but I also see it as a win-win-win, a win for both of our organisations and our clients, most importantly, because they're going to be more likely to go back to the defence sector and become a defence sector player over the long term. So I see it as a fantastic fit.
Fantastic. And so, and just a reminder, we will be sending out a copy of all the slides to everybody that registered and joined, and I believe we'll be sending a link to the video for you to share with your colleagues. So, Rob, are you able to facilitate our questions?
Sure. Well, thanks for attending, folks. My name's Rob Cook, and I've thrown a third accent into the mix here today. And you may wonder what the logo is that side. That's the logo of our training division, the Bid Academy. So Roger and I work in the same place, and we have to put up with Roger's tendering geekiness every day. And you would have seen his sort of excitement about his topic today. So I just realised too, also, that for reasons of commercial sensitivity, people may not wanted to have put questions into everyone. So if you do have a burning question, you could address it to the panelists and the hosts rather than everyone, and that means only I'll see it, and I'll keep names out of it. So we do have a single question, so you've either done a fantastic job or we've got a tough crowd here today, one of the two. And I won't mention the person asking it in case there is commercial sensitivity around it. But the question is, and I think it's for Rog, really, does BidWrite assist with writing bids for the health and well-being of employees within defence, or are your tenders mainly around manufacturing and equipment?
So good question. We help on any type of defence tender. So it's not just around manufacturing equipment and capability. Absolutely is around services, around innovation, around research. We're tendering experts. Our clients are their their own industry experts, their own subject matter experts, and the two working together. That's when you get great magic. So we are tendering experts. We don't specialise in any particular part of defence. We just help, particularly any opportunity within defence more broadly. So whoever that is, please feel free to reach out. We do have our contact details here as we go into the Q&A session. So please don't be shy in reaching out to us.
Great. Okay, thanks. And that's prompted a few more questions. But just before we move on, Emilio, the same would apply, I'm assuming, for your organisation? You don't have just particular types of industries that come to you?
No, I mean, we work with a lot of clients that are quite diverse in terms of the sectors they play in, but they tend to come to us for the defence sector expertise. So they might be a manufacturer, they may be a service provider, they may be a multinational or prime. They often come to us for different reasons, but it's always for knowledge around the defence sector.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, we've got 3 more questions just popped in, so this is fantastic. First question, are there more detailed workshops available for writing bids?
There definitely is. And we've recently launched a certified BidWriter program, which is a 10-week program specifically designed at developing competency within bid writing. So absolutely, we'll be delighted to provide some more detail on that, Charlotte.
Yep, that's a 10-week program, and it kicks off early next year. And you can jump onto the bidacademy.com.au and download all the information you'd need. So we've got dates up for it next year already. Next question. What's your experience or advice around responses to Indigenous procurement and AIC?
Well, I'll let Emilio take on the importance of those 2 things, and then we'll come on to the importance of those, our experience in tendering.
Sure. Well, it really depends on who you're tendering to and what you're tendering for. Certain organisations, certain primes within certain regions even will have different requirements for Indigenous procurement and AIC. What I can say is that the government and the Commonwealth of Australia, that is, as well as the Department of Defence, are very keen to increase Indigenous procurement. I know a lot of the prime defence contractors have specific programs in place to support the uptake of Indigenous procurement and support the development of more businesses that are Indigenous owned or of Indigenous heritage. And on the AIC side of things, that is extremely important, and is one of the things that has come out of the whole fundamental input to capability, or industry being recognised as a fundamental input to capability. So although it can be called a best endeavours program because there's no specific offsets program in place in Australia, it is mandatory for defence primes above a certain dollar value for their tenders to actually consider and to put forward an Australian industry capability plan to show that they've considered what's available out there in the Australian market and how they can get those companies involved. And there is weighting skewed towards an AIC component within the tenders, which I'm sure Roger will talk about, but it is extremely important. So if you are looking to tender and you've got those components you need to respond to, I would highly recommend you get the right advice.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a key part of it's probably one of the most important areas we actually help clients is actually help develop and shape and best realise their strategy from AIC and Indigenous procurement, Indigenous engagement. We spend a lot of focus on that. So a key part of the service, particularly on the larger ones, is always around those 2 areas. On the Indigenous side of things, we typically always recommend that you actually also engage with an expert in the Indigenous procurement side of things, because I'm not going to say here and tell you that I am an expert in Indigenous engagement, Indigenous working with Indigenous enterprises, because I'm not, but I can help certainly tell the story for our clients.
Great. Okay. Thank you. We've got 3 more questions that have popped in. Does BidWrite provide any support or webinars on the specifics of as DevCon contracting and the negotiating of contracts within defence? So
our speciality is around the DevCon framework from a response perspective. We do a lot of training and coaching on how to respond effectively in the DevCon environment. We do have a couple of trusted associates, if you like, on the commercial side of things that we can point organisations to in terms of needing any sort of commercial support in relation to OSDEF contracts. So if we can't provide the knowledge and expertise, we can link people up with that expertise.
Okay, great, thank you. A couple more here. What channels are best to approach regarding available tenders and possible bespoke product requirements?
You want to take that one, Amelia, or?
I can have a go at it. I mean, there's multiple channels that are out there, including OzTender and ICN are a good one. And some of the, so for example, some of the primes will have their own tender portals too, or pre-qualification portals and supplier portals where they'll communicate with you that way. So there's not a specific answer, unfortunately, but if you're not on OzTender and ICN, I'd highly recommend you do have a look at those two in particular, because for defence, they're two of the big ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I would ask is it's not a strategy to sit by and wait for the opportunity to appear in the ICN gateway or on OzTender, because by then it's too late and you've not done the work you need to do beforehand to give yourself the best possible chance of success.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, there's the old saying in our game that if you didn't know that the tender was going to be published, you're probably not going to win it. You know, so, okay, a couple more have popped in. How is it best to demonstrate experience when you don't have experience having completed defence projects?
Great question. Basically, you've just got to draw similarity. You've got to show the relevance of your experience and the benefit of that experience or that capabilities you have. So, you know, you may need some help in terms of being able to make those links. But absolutely, that's the way to do it. You know, whilst we've not worked in defence, we've worked in these similar projects, these similar services, and the benefit of this experience in relation to why it's relevant for the context now is this, and this. So the best way to do it is through that, or to partner with organisations that do have that experience and can bring that to the table for you in your proposals.
Yeah, I just add to that one. I'd say, as you said, around if there are similar experiences. So if you can draw, if you can reference other industries that you might have worked in that are highly regulated, such as oil and gas or mining, and those that require high quality. Rail is a great one for defence if you've done work in the rail sector in particular, because they have very stringent requirements. Then that's often a good way to do it. Defence primes like to see that you've taken on some projects of scale. And if you do have scale and a breadth of capability, that is very much something they'll be interested in. And then management systems and certifications to show that you have those certifications in place. And you have the business maturity too, so that you are setting strategy, that you are forecasting, that you have budgets and that type of thing. They will all go a long way to helping you actually break into the sector. And one thing I will say is that as much as people get worried about that chicken and egg scenario, defence is absolutely in need of more industry. If we want to be self-reliant, which is a big part of what the government's looking for here and what we need in the current geographical or strategic environment, I should say, then we need to have more industry involved. And that's just the Australian defence industry. Another thing they do want us to be doing is more exports as an Australian government. And if we look at the American Department of Defence, they also need more industry. They are at absolute capacity right now. So there's no reason that we can't get involved in those supply chains too from Australia. So there's some great opportunity and there are ways to do it. You just need to be willing to draw the references to similar industries or projects, for example.
Okay. Thanks both. I'm conscious we're conscious of time, but we've still got quite a few participants on the call.
We've got 3 more
questions, so if you want to keep going. Yep. These are some great questions. Okay. There's 3 more at the moment. So do you think there'll be a requirement for government or defence to only deal with Australian-owned companies?
I'm not sure. What defence does do occasionally is that they will sole source occasionally when there is a unique capability within Australia. They will do that. I can't really speak on behalf of the government. I can't see there be a broad sort of requirement to only deal with Australian-owned companies at this point in time? What about yourself, Emilio?
Yeah, my personal view is that will never be the case.
Yeah.
And purely and simply, as much as it would be lovely, and we'd love for more, well, only Australian industry to get involved, we simply don't have the breadth of expertise and depth of capacity to be able to do all of the things that we're looking to do. If you look at the current plans with the government. So, for example, our aerospace industry is nowhere near it. It's getting better. But if we go back to 30, 40, 50 years ago when we were actually manufacturing aircraft, that's not currently happening here. So will we only ever use Australian companies? I don't think so. I don't think we can afford to. We're too small a nation and we need to have alliances in place. That's my view. But I'd love to see the government actually supporting Australian industry more so that we can bring back some of the things that we have lost over the last few decades.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, a good frank answer from both. Thank you. Okay, another one. Could you please, and I think this is for both actually, can you please give examples of businesses you've helped in terms of their size, turnover size? So I guess that's a question about the range. Yeah.
So we work with organisations from small family-owned businesses right up to large defence primes. In terms of, I guess, the easiest way to answer that question is from a tender size perspective. There's often an investment ratio that's talked about in relation to any specific tendering opportunity. Organisations that are bidding really strategically typically need to look at an investment of between around about 0.5% to 1.5–2% of the contract value. So this means that it's a substantial investment, and for organisations to engage with us, the contract size needs to be probably, in terms of a minimum, needs to be around about $1 million. For those that are tendering for contracts below that value, then the best options is to, and we can absolutely do this, is help develop competency within your own organisation through some of the training programs that we have on offer. That's from our side, Emilio.
Yeah, I think the best way to answer it is in terms of the size of the businesses that we often help. So generally, we do help 1 or 2 person organisations where they need a DIS membership, and we get quite a few of those where they're a contractor working for DSTG or someone like that. So we'll help them. But generally speaking, when we're talking defence industry market entry, defence strategy work and grants, generally speaking, those businesses are somewhere between the 10 and 200 person businesses. But we do have businesses that we're helping with strategy that are 700, 800 people. And we do have businesses that have got a few thousand people across the globe when we're talking defence security too, and protective security. So it really does vary, but there are eligibility requirements around a lot of the grants that mean that we can only help businesses up to a certain size in that area. But yeah, with things like defence security, it can be businesses.
We're definitely a small company, Emilio. We're less than 30 people, and you did a great job for us.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Emilio, you're in the chat, I see. So there was a question in there around DISP.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yes.
So the question was, with regards to the security requirements, whilst the DISP application is still processing, is there a contract tier level to target that doesn't have those requirements? So if I understand that correctly, you may be talking about those tiers that I was talking about earlier in terms of the primes down and the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Please let me know if I haven't understood that correctly. But look, if that is the case, then sometimes you're more likely to be able to tender with and win work with the lower tier organisations if you don't have your DIS membership in place than you are with a prime. Some of the primes will mandate DIS membership. Others will suggest that it is definitely something they'd like to see you getting on board with or getting on the journey for. But there have been some delays associated with DIS membership recently because the DISO offices have essentially been closed. The good news is it is back online. So DIS memberships should be processed from now much more quickly. They've got quite a backlog. But the other thing I would say is that generally speaking, if you've got a prime and they understand the position you're in that you've already applied and that you've done the security maturity uplift work that is required, generally speaking, they'll still want to talk to you and they'll still let you through the process, but they will want to know that you're on the path to attaining your DIS membership. The other thing to note around dismembership is that sometimes some of the primes may not say much about it, and that could be because they've got an old legacy contract, which may not have had this as an obligation under the contract to flow through. Whereas when we see new contracts being let by government and by the primes, those are now stipulating that this membership is an obligation. So it just depends sometimes how old the project is that you're looking to win work on.
Great. Thanks, Emilio, for a really comprehensive response. I think
that's it, is it?
Yeah, I think we've run out of steam on the
Okay.
questions. Some fantastic questions, so thank you very much, and thank you, folks, for hanging in there. Roger, I'll let you do the concluding.
Yeah, no, thank you, sort of on behalf of Emilio and myself. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us today. You know, we're super excited about what we can achieve for Australian industry and our partnership together. If you've got any questions, hopefully it's come across, you know, how sort of free we are in terms of sharing our knowledge. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with either organisations, and we will be providing copies of the slides and I think a link to the video for sharing within your own organisation. So thanks very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great one. Thank you.